All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here on the Harmless Dave channel. Cue the music. Yes, it's time for another exciting edition of As the Who Turns. As the Who Turns is brought to you by Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube memberships, and PJ Rock Super Chats. It's also this episode, because of the organ music, brought to you by the memory of the late great organist John Kiley. He used to play at Fenway Park and Boston Garden. Garden. He used to play at the Garden. He had a whole thing that he would do after the Bruins would score a goal. He had his own song that I think he composed. Either that or he played something that I wasn't familiar with, but he played it all the time. And I miss that kind of stuff growing up in the Boston area. Speaking of Boston, right? The Who plays Fenway Park, and they hit the ball right over the Green Monster. By the way, doing what I do in real time for a couple of people, just like you there and like me here. So this isn't going to be the typical As the Who Turns. I just like using the music, and I'm reporting the good stuff here. I know people want drama, people want turmoil and problems. Here's the review from Boston.com. The Who were seen, heard, and felt at a powerful Fenway Park farewell show. Now, Daltrey is doing a good job out there. Roger is hitting most of those notes. He's 81. You got to give him some credit. And Pete doing a pretty good job, right? There are some things that people are noting. The reviewer here is going to talk about how Simon Townsend sings Going Mobile. Like that's a problem. And, this shows that Pete's getting old, but this has been going on the entire tour. So it's okay. Simon does he should have talked about how great Simon was, but the reviewer kind of missed that. The Who didn't act their age at Fenway Park. Okay, yada, yada. There's a cliche. Let's go down and read some of this. Okay, after canceling a couple of shows, which was part of As the Who Turns, and it looked as though maybe they're going to cancel more concerts. I'm just reading the headline that the governor of Massachusetts is making boosters more accessible. It's in this article, and I just caught my eye, and I'm like, I'm so glad I live in Florida, where they just eliminated any mandates for this crap. They just eliminated them, or they're going to. They haven't officially done it, but it's been announced. All right. So let me try to stay on topic here. All of those fears were swiftly allayed, meaning that after two concerts got canceled, people thought, uh-oh, this might not be good. Those fears were swiftly allayed when Roger Daltrey, all of 81 years old, lit into a full-throated rendition of I Can't Explain. Now, someone had uploaded some sound check stuff from Fenway Park, and I thought it was really cool. So I don't have a link, but if you do a little research, searching around here on YouTube, you may find the sound check from Fenway Park, or at least some of it. So much of The Who's music hinges on Daltrey's voice, and the front man didn't disappoint. From the larynx shredding screams of Love Reign Over Me to the memorable yeah that punctuates Won't Get Fooled Again. I can't do the yeah. I mean, it's a scream. Daltrey never shied away from pushing his vocal cords to the limit. All right, so that's pretty cool. It says here in parentheses, it's a good thing he got them treated at Mass General Hospital back in 2009. Huh. I didn't know that, but there you go. There's a Boston connection to Roger Daltrey's vocal cords. But it wasn't just the screamable moments where Daltrey shined, playing behind a video backdrop of images from the band's heyday. Daltrey turned back the clock on songs like Who Are You and Pinball Wizard. When the band quieted down to let Daltrey sing a perfectly on pitch See Me, Feel Me, more than a few tears were shed in my section. That's pretty cool. Now, interesting here. I'm not big on the images, the backdrop. I know people like that stuff and it makes the show better, blah, blah. I want to focus on the band. I mean, these things, maybe because these guys are older, they're thinking, yeah, they'll just look at the screen the whole night. They've already got a screen in their pocket. They're probably going to look through the entire night to record the thing. So you're gonna have a screen that you have recording a bigger screen behind the band. I don't know. I'm Look, I'm old school. That's why there's like a blues bar down the street from me, and these guys just get up there and they play a show, and you're like 10 feet, 20 feet away from the band. You sit at a table and you're just blown away by these guys playing, expertly playing most of the time. It's just the way music is supposed to be. But okay, it's Fenway Park. You got to have a show, right? And I think people pay for the show. So I understand that. The only moment, this is kind of funny here, and may be the only soap opera ish part of this particular episode. The only moment Daltrey got over his skis was when he attempted to play the harmonica solo, or the outro, during Baba O'Reilly, giving up halfway through and waving off the crowd with a rueful laugh. Now, Townsend looks over and says, "We had a fiddle player on our last tour, and we loved her." So these two, I don't know, I think that was all kind of tongue-in-cheek and a fun little quip there. But these two guys, they're not best of friends. Let's just put it that way. And it's kind of sad because it's Daltrey and Townsend, right? Of the two remaining founding members. And by the way, this really gets on people's nerves that they call this the Who. Some people are upset about this because obviously there's no Keith Moon, there's no John Entwistle, and there's no Zach Starkey anymore, which is kind of a bummer. But anyway, the guitarist, Pete, invited the crowd to take their seats and passing the singing duties over to his brother, Simon, on Going Mobile. Now, I don't see why that's a problem, but this reviewer is like, well, that just shows that Pete's getting old. I'm like, no, they've been doing this the whole tour so far. They also say a couple of his guitar solos were a bit muted as well, but Townsend still had plenty of windmills in his arsenal. Yeah, I mean, you got to judge the show by how many windmills that Pete Townsend does. I see, this is where reviewers... that's just all like, show stuff. That's like the stuff that Pete did back in what, the 60s, 70s, the windmills, and he's still doing them because it's part of his shtick. But I wouldn't be like, wow, look at that windmill that he did. He doesn't have to do a windmill if he doesn't want to. He's 80 years old. If he's playing really good solos, and he's actually singing lead vocals on a couple of tracks here. Eminence Front being one of my favorite all-time The Who songs, and a song called I'm One. So good for Pete Townsend. Sounds like they did a great job in Boston. Daltrey told a story about Boston, how he was arrested in Montreal, and then the next gig was at the Boston Garden, and apparently the Boston crowd went crazy and gave them a little boost. What's interesting is Boston is a classic rock-rich remnant, okay? These are people who believe in classic rock. They had great radio stations like WBCN and WZLX, among others, right? WAAF out in Worcester. This is just an area that really loves this kind of music, and people there, all in the tech industry for the most part. If you live inside 495, you've probably got a lot of disposable income. You have to live there because the cost of living is pretty sick. In other words, you probably make a lot of money. What's also interesting is the Joe Perry Project opened up for The Who. That's really cool. And Chris Robinson has been hanging out from the Black Crowes. He's been hanging out with Joe Perry, and they did a lot of Aerosmith stuff, including Last Child, Walk This Way, and Train Kept a Rollin', which is actually, I think, an old blues tune. But the only downside, I guess, to the show was that at the end, because of the curfew at Fenway Park, they didn't do The Song Is Over. Instead, they ended with Tea and Theater. So people may have been a little bummed out about that. I don't know. Maybe do a 60s tune for your last tune, because typically they're short songs from the 60s. Those AM radio guys, they had to get in and out really quick and do a quick plug and then a 3-minute song or a 2-minute song, and then they're back to yet another song or 10 ads in a row. The days of AM radio. So the Who, they do a good job in Boston. That's how I interpret this review. So not much drama other than the fact that Roger ran out of gas on harmonica and Pete gave him a little bit of a hard time about it. So I don't know. Maybe they'll bring the fiddle player back, or maybe Roger will try it again. I give him credit for trying, right? Anyway, this video, you got to give me a little credit here. It's a slow day in the world of classic rock, and trying to make this into an episode of As the Who Turns was a bit of a stretch, but I just like the organ music, and this episode I'm dedicating to the late, great John Kiley, the organist who played at Fenway Park and also at the Boston Garden, or as I'm supposed to say, Garden. PAHK and Garden. Get your Boston right, man. All right. Thanks to everybody for watching. God bless. Remember, Jesus actually does love you. Even if you've not accepted Christ, Jesus loves you, and he wants you to have faith in him. That's what grace is all about. It's grace. It's not about what you do or what your life's been like, because God accepted some really gnarly people throughout the Old Testament and into the New Testament. All of these people with problems, those are the people that Jesus always gravitated towards. So there you go. People like me and people like you.